But let's get into A Quiet Place now that I've done my trailer review rundown bullshit. Ultimately, what I'm going to say is that Quiet Place Part 2, pretty damn good. One of the biggest things is I did not realize how short this movie was. I think it's an hour and 37 minutes, I want to say. Yeah, an hour and 37 minutes. And honestly, it felt like 45 minutes. This movie just goes. The only time it's really slow, like I heard some people when I was leaving the theater say like, oh, it was a little bit slow in the middle. And I'm just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, honestly, I just like, the movie ended and I was like, oh, wait, what? Like, I genuinely did not, like, time just was like nothing. And this also could be maybe a product of I just haven't seen a movie in a theater in a while, and maybe that's it. But like, genuinely, this movie just flew by. And it starts, as I'm sure you've seen in the trailer, with the day one stuff. This is not spoilers, you know. If you see it, you know, the same bullshit of, hey, they're driving, and then monster appears. And I'll say this shit was really, really good. I enjoyed it. I liked the suspense. I liked seeing the characters, and it introduces Cillian Murphy's character slightly. And I thought it was I was really happy to see it, but I really don't know if I would say it was needed. It wasn't like a necessity. I did think that it was a little bit jarring how they did not get the same actor for the little kid. And there are some scenes because, like, obviously it's been I think it was a year or two after the first time that they filmed this. They should have spent a little bit more of like de-aging or making the kids look younger, because they've both clearly have gotten older, hit puberty, and it's, you know, they do not look like they look much older than the first film. And again, technically things have only supposed to have passed a few, you know, only a few days that should have passed. And then obviously in the day one stuff, they're supposed to be younger. Ultimately, that's just a nitpick, but I just thought that it was really, really well done. And then you cut back literally the day, it starts off immediately after the events of the first movie. Like, it just starts. It's just as if the first movie had ended. And I think that it did a really good job in terms of not doing a bunch of recap bullshit. You know what I mean? I think so many sequels do this thing where they think you haven't seen the first movie. And I'm just like, motherfucker, of course we've seen the first movie. We're coming to see part 2, you know? So I just think that it just really trusted its audience to just allow the movie to go with minimal flashbacks. The only flashback was the day one stuff. Like, and I do think they should have done maybe one more flashback, but I'll get into that a little bit later. But ultimately, I thought that was something I really, 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 really enjoyed. And ultimately, I think that one thing too that I really, really enjoyed was the cinematography. John Krasinski, he just does a phenomenal job once again with both part 1 and part 2. Something that blew me away. And at first I thought they did it more this movie than they did in the first. And I was worried that it was going to become a gimmick throughout the film, but which is the whenever it cuts to the daughter's point of view. I want to get her name right because she is really, really good. Reagan Abbott, she knocks it out of the park, man. She does such a goddamn good job with some pretty tough scenes that, again, I'm sure she's only like, can't be older than like 16 or whatever. She really knocks it out of the park. And I think that's something that I've realized is I think it was a common thing back in the day that like, oh, kids in movies ruin the film, but she doesn't. And the kid from It, her brother, he also does a pretty good job. And I mean, I feel bad for him because even in It, he's the annoying kid. And in this movie, there's a few scenes where I'm just like, bruh, what are you doing? Just like, can we just like not, you know? But yeah, ultimately they obviously, it's in the trailers. I'm not spoiling anything. They do meet Cillian Murphy's character, and without spoiling anything, does a really good job. He one thing that I really do like is that they kind of just like ease into his characterization, and they don't try to go ham-fisted. But I think that does have some double-edged sword, which is because there are obviously points in the movie where characters aren't together, you know. And I think that because they're cutting back and forth between the different characters, it actually makes it so that it's a little bit harder to get to grow with his character. And that is probably one of the weakest things I'll say is I think that he is great. And because it's just Cillian Murphy and he's such a great actor, I think he's able to sell it. But in terms of just writing and like characterization, I'll say that they bill him as one character, but then in my opinion, he too quickly changes. And that's not bad. And again, Cillian Murphy does a great job of like selling it. But what I will say is that they have a day one flashback where you see John's character again. And I think that they do and I think like I was said earlier, that's really, really well done. And that is kind of to just reestablish who these characters are, what their lives were before. And then when it cuts back to after the first movie, it's like, oh shit, now we know all we've lost. Because I'm going to spoil it. Obviously, John's character dies. The youngest kid dies. And, you know, that weight, it's really well done. The weight that you feel seeing that, and obviously all the terror, but then cutting back, and now it's just Emily Blunt's character, the kid, and the kids. You know, it's really his absence is really felt. And I think, again, Cillian Murphy's character and Cillian Murphy himself like had a big shoes to fill. And I just think they do such a spectacular job of filling it. And, you know, once again, I mean, you know, Emily Blunt, like, there's nothing else to say. I do always mix her up for that one fucking comedian on Saturday Night Live, whatever the fuck her name is, and who's in Wonder Woman 2. For some reason, I always mix them up. I know I'm racist, but hey, I can't help it. It is the truth. But yeah, Emily Blunt does such an amazing job in this, you know, same as the first movie. Because characters do split up, I think that it adds for a lot of great suspense. Like, oh my God, like how the different characters when they're apart, like how they sync up different scenes with them. Like basically one character will be doing one thing, another character will be another. And it's like kind of like they both are kind of linked in the suspense. And oh my God, it does such a great job of building that suspense and not cutting it as it cuts between characters. So many goddamn horror movies, as they cut to different scenes or different characters, sometimes it can lose its weight. But one thing that's really great is that it cuts to characters that we already have established and we already have these close feelings towards, and then it doesn't break up those different scenes with like, ooh, in this cut we're gonna have a bunch of dialogue, in this cut we're gonna have a bunch of no. It does not like basically have anything that disrupts the flow as it cuts. And there's like there's 3 times it does this where it's like, you know, the music is going, it's cutting back between all the different characters, and it's like crescendoing, and it's just like, so well done. Yeah, I can't say enough about how the characters get enough room to breathe without going overboard. Ultimately, like I said, I felt this was really mad short. Not bad, but like I said, I deadass thought this was like 40 minutes long. The first movie, and this is one thing I really did like about the first movie, and I will say I really enjoyed about this one, was that these are tight movies. Same with the first one, same with this one. I thought that they don't overstay their welcome. And I think that's the best horror movies, because we all know we've seen those horror movies, and Many, especially in the last decade, many of them have done it well. But we know those fucking horror movies in which they're like 2 hours long, or even if they're an hour and a half long, they just have horrible pacing. This, breakneck pacing, from the day one stuff to the normal time, that kind of thing. And, trying to go back to the Cillian Murphy thing is like, that is where I wish it would have just slowed down just a smidge and maybe cut back to day one, and we can see where the Cillian Murphy stuff happens, because they do not go into his character backstory much, which I don't think they needed to, but I just think would have made his decisions have a little bit more weight to them, and his changing of characters, because I'm not spoiling anything. His character starts one way, changes. Oh my God. But, I think how he starts is a pretty cold dude, and how he transitions. I just think that they could have done a little bit better job fleshing his character out. But ultimately, I thought it was, again, handled pretty damn well. And the last thing I want to talk about is just like, I have a big thing about sequels and prequels and all this shit. I think that, especially when it comes to movies and especially television, but I think television has this a little bit worse, but that's a whole different conversation. I think there are so many movies that do not justify their sequels. And there are so many sequels that aren't warranted or justified. And when it comes to that conversation with Quiet Place Part 2, I'll say it's a blend of both. I think that it is both. How do I put this? I'll say is that the first movie, how it ends, you kind of already know what's going to happen next. You know what I mean? It ends with them figuring out the frequency thing, and then her, fucking going, killing the fucking alien, and it ends amazingly, The ending in this movie is also really good. But, we kind of get it. Basically, the whole point of this movie is that they try to find people and, and let them know about the frequency thing. And that frequency that can, incapacitate the aliens. Ultimately, basically everything I thought was going to happen in terms of the goals or what they tried to achieve pretty much happened. This isn't a movie where you're like, oh wow, like I'm shocked that happened. No. So this is kind of like a tiering thing. I thought the first movie, how it ended, perfectly awesome, didn't need a sequel. When part 2 is coming out, I was excited for it, but I was like, do you really need it? And I was like, and I basically guessed everything that happened. Even before I even sat down in the theater, I knew it was basically going to happen. And yes, everything I thought that was going to happen happened. But in terms of justifying itself, I think it justifies itself not in that it tells a story that we didn't know what was coming, but it justifies itself by just being another solid goddamn movie. You know what I mean? There's nothing about this movie that is so egregious where you're like, why the fuck was this made, or whatever. Obviously, I can have a whole conversation about, greed and all that shit, and how we have to keep making all these movies that there's no need for them, and I think you could make an argument that there is no need for this sequel, but it just is so well done. The score is amazing, cinematography is great, lighting's great. Like, honestly, the lighting people never get enough fucking credit, and I just think they do such a great job of making things visible at night. I know this is like sounds stupid, but it's an honest to God issue that so many horror movies have, which is like, you're like, they're either too bright and you're like, huh? Or they're like so dark. They're too bright and you're like, dude, like what the fuck? Like, of course I can see everything. Or they're like too dark and you're just like, what the fuck's going on? I think that they do a great job there. I think the ending is amazing. All the sequences are great. Like, there's very little I can say bad about this movie. So, of course, I highly recommend everyone watch this. If you like the first one, this is really damn good. You know, ultimately, everyone does a great job, and I highly recommend it. I think that I can't wait for this movie to be on demand and online, because I do think that watching these movies back to back will be a treat. However, I am going to say that this is a strong 8 out of 10 movie, but I do think a third movie is absolutely unwarranted and honestly could go and could ruin this movie. And I don't know what the rumor mill is, but like, genuinely, there is no need for a third movie. That's all I'll say, because I don't want to spoil anything, but there's legitimately no reason for a third movie. And I do think that, yeah, a third movie could ruin this. But overall, Quiet Place 2, Part 2, fantastic, 8 out of 10, highly recommend it. If you feel safe to go out into the theaters, dude, do it. I saw it in IMAX, and I did not regret it.